Miles Hartwick used the words shadow IT 6 times in the first 20 minutes of his presentation. He used technical debt 4 times and legacy tool dependency twice. He never mentioned that the carrier scorecard saved $1,800,000 the year before. He never mentioned the slotting algorithm. He never mentioned the claims pipeline. When he finished, I stood up. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Lyle Costa. I'm 49 years old. I spent 25 years at Midsouth Distribution Services in Memphis, Tennessee. I came up on the warehouse floor. I taught myself to write code at a kitchen table after dinner. I built 3 data systems that nobody asked me to build, and that nobody, until a Wednesday morning in March of 2026, ever thought to call a risk. My father, Manuel Costa, ran a textile loom in Fall River, Massachusetts for 26 years. He never complained about it. He just showed up and worked. My mother, Fernanda, was a school secretary for 31 years. She knew every kid in that building by name. Both of them worked hard at things nobody celebrated and never asked for recognition. That was the house I grew up in. I moved to Memphis in 1999 with an industrial engineering degree and no real plan. Got a job as a warehouse supervisor. 2 years later, I joined Midsouth Distribution Services. 820,000 square feet of warehouse near the Memphis airport. Third-party logistics. They managed freight and warehousing for consumer goods companies, pharmaceutical distributors, and retailers across the Mid-South. 47 active carrier relationships, about 4.3 million units processed per month. I spent my first 7 years on the floor. I knew every aisle in that building. I knew which carriers were reliable and which ones billed you for services they didn't deliver. I knew which product locations were costing us in peak travel time. The problem was, all of it was in my head. Nobody else could see it. So in 2008, I started writing it down, not in a notebook, in code. I taught myself SQL that year, then Python. I did it at the kitchen table most nights. After about 6 months, I had something worth showing. The first thing I built was a carrier performance scorecard, a daily dashboard that tracked on-time delivery rates, cargo damage ratios, and one more thing most systems ignored: accessorial charge compliance. Carriers love to bill for things not in their contracts: fuel surcharges that don't match the formula, detention fees on loads that delivered on time. It adds up fast. Almost nobody watches it closely enough. I was watching it. By 2012, the scorecard was running across the whole network. In the first year, it found 8 carriers overbilling us or missing delivery standards. We renegotiated with 5 and cut the other 3. Documented savings that year: $1,200,000. By 2025, the annual savings had grown to $1,800,000. The second system was a warehouse slotting algorithm. It took me 3 years to build right. The idea is simple. In an 820,000 square foot warehouse with 14,000 active products, where you put something determines how long it takes to pick it. High-frequency picks near the dock, heavy items low. Pallets needing temperature zones isolated. Get the placement right and you cut the distance a picker walks per shift. Less walking means more picks per hour. More picks per hour means lower labor cost. When we implemented the slotting algorithm in 2015, average pick travel distance dropped 31%. Annual labor savings, audited by the operations team every quarter, $2,200,000. The third system was a claims resolution pipeline. Before I built it, a cargo damage claim at Midsouth took an average of 47 days to settle. Some sat for 6 months, money owed to us sitting in a spreadsheet nobody had time to manage. I built an automated workflow that flagged claims, pulled the documentation, and pushed everything to the right people in the right order. Settlement time dropped to 12 days. In the first year, the pipeline recovered $880,000 in claims we had already written off. That number came back every year after. 3 systems, 25 years of work, total documented annual value, $4,880,000. Audited, verified, in the CFO's quarterly reports. Nobody called them shadow IT until Miles Hartwick arrived. If you've ever worked somewhere long enough to actually understand how things work, not on paper, but on the floor, when things go wrong and someone needs an answer, you know exactly where this is going. Hit that like button and subscribe. Miles came to Midsouth in January of 2025, 39 years old. 12 years at McKinsey's supply chain practice, MBA from Emory's Goizueta Business School. He had published a chapter in a logistics trade journal about something called enterprise data orchestration. He had never configured a warehouse management system. He had never processed a cargo damage claim. He had never been on a distribution center floor when things were going wrong. Kevin Larrabee, our CEO, had known Miles since business school, classmates at Goizueta. When the private equity firm that owned Midsouth told Kevin to launch a data-first transformation, Kevin called his old friend. Miles's title was Vice President of Analytics and Data Strategy. He introduced himself to me the week he arrived. Firm handshake. He said he was looking forward to getting to know the existing systems. I said I'd give him whatever access he needed. I meant it. Everything was documented. I had nothing to hide. For the next 12 months, Miles ran what he called a technology modernization assessment. He asked for read-only access to my 3 systems. I gave it. He asked for the documentation. I handed it over. In September, I found out he had emailed Kevin describing my systems as point solutions with significant technical debt. I didn't see that email at the time. My senior analyst, Jenny Truong, found out and told me in October. Jenny had been with me since 2019. She knew the scorecard and the slotting algorithm as well as I did. I read the email once. Filed it. That same October, I got a call from Sandra Ohlendorf at Crestline Logistics. Crestline was the largest third-party logistics company in Memphis. $680 million in revenue. 1,800 employees. Sandra was their executive VP of operations. She said she had been watching what Midsouth's analytics team was producing and wanted to talk about an opportunity. I took the meeting. By January 2026, I had a written offer at home. Head of Data and Analytics at Crestline. Base salary of $320,000 a year. I was making $212,000 at Midsouth. I told Diane that night, my wife. She sat at the kitchen table, listened, and when I was done, she said, 4 months. She meant a small bonus vesting milestone at Midsouth. I said, I know. She said, it's not worth 4 months. I said, I know. Then I told her I wanted to stay through the executive presentation. I wanted to hear what Miles was going to tell the people who had approved my quarterly audits for 14 years. She said, okay. I signed the Crestline offer the next morning. On Tuesday evening, March 3rd, 2026, at 10:48 at night, Jenny sent me an email. Subject line, FYI, got copied on something. Attached was a preview of Miles's presentation deck. 41 slides. I read all 41 slides on my laptop in bed. Kevin was going to be in that room. Patricia Wynn, the CFO. Derek Hayes, VP of Operations. Angela Borum from Client Services. All of them had seen my quarterly savings reports. All of them had signed off on the carrier renegotiations and the slotting analysis. Slide 27 was titled, Current State, Shadow IT Risk. 3 bullet points. Carrier scorecard, unsanctioned, undocumented, single developer dependency. Slotting. Algorithm. Legacy custom tool, no vendor support, high technical debt. Claims pipeline, isolated workflow, not integrated with enterprise systems. No savings figures, not one number from 14 years of audited work. Miles was recommending decommissioning all 3 systems by the 3rd quarter of 2026. I closed the laptop. The room was dark. Diane was asleep. I thought about my father at that loom for 26 years. I thought about Patricia Wynn in 2017 telling me the slotting data was the best operational reporting she had ever seen. I thought about the word undocumented on slide 27, written by a man who had read every document I had ever produced. I set my alarm for 6:30 and went to sleep. The presentation started at 9 in the morning on Wednesday, March 4th. 3rd floor conference room, Kevin at the head of the table, Patricia Wynn on his left, Derek Hayes and Angela Borum across from each other. I sat at the far end. Miles had a clicker. He moved through the slides fast. He talked about SAP Extended Warehouse Management. He talked about SAP Transportation Management. He talked about 18 months of implementation and a fully integrated data environment. He used Shadow IT 6 times. He used technical debt 4 times. He used legacy tool dependency twice. When he reached slide 27, he didn't look at me. He read the bullet points. Unsanctioned. Single developer dependency, high technical debt. He moved through it in about 90 seconds and recommended decommissioning all 3 systems by the 3rd quarter. Nobody in the room asked what the systems were currently producing. At 10:41, Miles finished. Patricia Wynn asked, "What's the projected timeline for migrating the carrier performance data to SAP's transportation module?" Miles said, "Approximately 18 months." Patricia said, And during that 18 months, Miles said, we'll use SAP's standard carrier performance module. Patricia wrote something on her notepad. Kevin leaned back. He had heard what he expected. $1,800,000, $2,200,000, $880,000. Not one of those numbers was on any slide on that screen. I stood up. Nobody stopped me. I said, I want to put 3 numbers on record before the decision is finalized because they weren't in the presentation. The room was quiet. Kevin had his hands flat on the table. Patricia had her pen up. I said, the carrier scorecard, the undocumented single developer dependency on slide 27, saved $1,800,000 last year. I have the full documentation. I paused. The slotting algorithm saved $2,200,000 in annual labor cost. The pick distance reduction has been audited quarterly by Patricia's team. I looked at Patricia Wynn. She nodded once. The claims pipeline recovered $880,000 in its first year and saves that amount every year after. I picked up my folder. I'll be leaving Midsouth in 3 weeks. I accepted an offer from Crestline Logistics last month. I wanted the executive team to have those numbers before making the final decision. I thanked Kevin by name. I walked out. I didn't wait for a response. 25 years, 44 seconds. Behind me, the meeting kept going. Patricia Wynn asked Miles directly, why were those savings figures not in the presentation? Miles said the systems were not enterprise grade and couldn't be meaningfully compared to an SAP implementation. Patricia said, that's not an answer to the question I asked. Kevin was quiet. Patricia sent a follow-up email to Kevin that evening. She asked for a full reconciliation of my documented savings against the projected SAP implementation cost and the 18-month migration window. She wanted the numbers by end of week. I know all this because Derek Hayes called me on Thursday. Derek was VP of Operations. He wasn't at war with anyone. He told me what had happened after I left the room. He said Patricia's face when Miles gave his answer was something he wouldn't forget quickly. On Thursday morning, Kevin Larrabee called me. Kevin said, is the Crestline offer final? I said, yes. He said, we could counter. I said, Kevin, the systems work. You've seen the quarterly audits for 14 years. What Miles called shadow IT is what kept the carrier network profitable. Kevin said, I understand that now. I said, good luck with the SAP rollout. I ended the call. Jenny Truong and Marcelo Santos spent the next 3 weeks on transition documentation. Marcelo was my operations data analyst. He had been with me since 2021. He knew the claims pipeline the way I knew the scorecard. When Miles asked if Marcelo could take on system ownership of all 3 tools, Marcelo said, I can maintain them. I can't rebuild them if SAP replaces them. Those are 2 different things. Miles said he understood. He didn't understand. Jenny stopped by my office one afternoon in the 2nd week of March. She said, you know I'm not staying, right? I said I figured she'd make her own call. She said, they're going to turn this into a lesson about undocumented systems. They're going to miss the point entirely. I said, probably. She said, that doesn't bother you? I said, it bothered me for about 14 years. Right now it doesn't. She left it at that. My last day at Midsouth Distribution Services was Tuesday, March 25th, 2026. I shook hands with Jenny and Marcelo in the analytics room. I said I'd be in touch. Jenny said she knew. At Crestline, I started with the carrier scorecard because it was the most urgent. They had 49 carriers. Their existing tracking was a spreadsheet managed by a coordinator who had 3 other jobs, updated monthly sometimes. No accessorial charge compliance column at all. I built the new scorecard in 6 weeks. The Crestline version was cleaner than the Midsouth original. Better data pipeline, faster refresh, more granular compliance flags. The first production run went live on Friday, June 12th at 7:04 in the morning. The first daily report generated at 7:15, 49 carriers, on-time delivery rates, damage ratios, accessorial charge compliance flags, 3 carriers flagged on the first run. I marked them and moved to the next tab. Back at Midsouth, the SAP implementation had kicked off in April. Miles brought in an integration team from Atlanta. The carrier performance module was the first thing they deployed. It ran on standard industry metrics, on-time delivery rates, damage ratios. What it did not have was accessorial charge compliance tracking, no fuel surcharge accuracy monitoring, no logic to flag billing anomalies against individual carrier contract terms. That was the custom layer I had built in 2012. No commercial platform had it. Nobody had asked whether SAP did before recommending we decommission the one that did. By July, Midsouth's transportation team had found a 12% increase in unauthorized accessorial charges from 3 carriers. 3 carriers. Billing for things that weren't in their contracts. The same thing the scorecard had been catching and flagging for 14 years. Patricia Wynn's team ran the numbers. Annual exposure, $430,000. Miles's team said the issue would be addressed in Phase 2 of the SAP implementation. Phase 2 was scheduled for the first quarter of 2027. 9 months away. Patricia sent a second email to Kevin. Jenny Truong joined me at Crestline in late July. She submitted her resignation at Midsouth and started the following week. We built the slotting algorithm and the claims pipeline from scratch for Crestline's facility. Different warehouse, different products. Same logic. By the end of August, all 3 systems were running on Crestline's infrastructure. The claims pipeline went live on September 2nd. In September, Miles was running his 3rd executive briefing on SAP implementation progress. Kevin was in the room. Patricia was in the room. The transportation cost line for the 3rd quarter was up 9% year over year. Patricia had the $430,000 accessorial charge exposure number in front of her. Kevin looked at the slide for a long time. Miles said Phase 2 would fix the compliance gap. Kevin said, "When is Phase 2 scheduled?" Miles said, "First quarter of 2027. The room was quiet. Kevin said, "Miles, I need you to walk me through how this happened." That was September of 2026. I wasn't in that room, but I've heard enough about it to know that Miles's answer did not go well. By September, Sandra Ohlendorf had an idea. She came into my office with a notepad. She said Crestline was in a position to offer data services to other regional logistics operators, access to our carrier performance analytics platform as a subscription, including a version of the carrier scorecard logic, updated for a client's specific carrier network. The price, $180,000 per year. I said, "Who were you thinking?" She said, "Midsouth Distribution Services." I said, "That's going to be an interesting phone call." She said, "Do you have any objection?" I thought about it. 14 years, slide 27. The word undocumented. I said, "No objection." Sandra called Derek Hayes at Midsouth the following week. Derek had been watching the transportation cost numbers climb since July. He had the $430,000 accessorial charge exposure in his quarterly report. He had Phase 2's timeline on his calendar. He knew what a carrier scorecard did and how long it took to build one. He signed the consulting agreement in the 3rd week of September. $180,000 per year. Midsouth was now paying to access a system built on the same logic as the one they had let walk out the door 6 months earlier. Sandra told me when the agreement was signed. She said, "You're not going to say anything?" I said, "Patricia Wynn is going to see that line item in her budget report. She'll understand exactly what it means." Sandra said, "Probably." I said, "That's enough." It was enough. In November of 2026, Ridgecrest Capital removed Miles Hartwick as VP of Analytics and Data Strategy. 3rd quarter transportation costs were up 9%, accessorial charge exposure still unresolved. A SAP Phase 2 pushed to the 2nd quarter of 2027. Miles updated his LinkedIn within the week. He was now transitioning to independent consulting in strategy and technology advisory, with a focus on enterprise data transformation for mid-market logistics operators. I saw the post. I read it once. I did not comment. Kevin Larrabee called me in November. I took the call. He said, "I owe you an apology." I said, "Kevin." He said, "The savings figures should have been in that presentation. I should have asked for them before the meeting. That was a mistake." I said, "I appreciate that." He said, "I trusted Miles because I've known him a long time. That's not a good reason." I said, "No, it's not." He said Patricia had been auditing every operational cost line since August. She found 3 other areas with undocumented savings. She was building a tracking process now. He said she kept saying my name when she talked about it. I said, "Tell her the documentation is only half of it. The other half is making sure the right people read it." Kevin said, "Yeah, I know." We ended the call on decent terms. Kevin made a bad call and he admitted it. That's more than most people do. Jenny Truong settled in at Crestline. By October, she had the slotting algorithm running across the full facility. In November, she proposed a change to the pick frequency weighting that dropped our average travel distance by another 6% on top of the original 31. I signed off on it the same day she proposed it. Marcelo Santos called me in December. He was done at Midsouth. He asked if there was room at Crestline. I told him to send his resume to Sandra. He started in January of 2027. The three of us rebuilt everything we had built at Midsouth. Then we built past it. Crestline's transportation costs dropped 11% in the first full year of the carrier scorecard, 11% across a carrier network 3 times the size of Midsouth's. The claims pipeline cut Crestline's average settlement time from 51 days to 9 days. 9 days. Faster than what I had achieved at Midsouth because I built the Crestline version on a cleaner architecture with 14 more years of knowledge behind it. Sandra brought the results to the Crestline board in February of 2027. The board approved a budget to expand the data services consulting arm. Midsouth was the proof of concept. By the end of 2027, we had consulting arrangements with 4 regional logistics operators across the Mid-South and Mid-Atlantic, $180,000 each per year. The carrier scorecard logic, running on a codebase I owned, serving the same industry. My father ran a textile loom in Fall River for 26 years. He showed up every day and ran it. He made it work. Nobody celebrated it. He never asked them to. I spent 25 years in a warehouse in Memphis doing the same thing. One difference. I wrote down every number the machine produced, every dollar saved, every carrier renegotiation, every claim recovered. I kept the records. When someone wrote the word undocumented on a slide next to 14 years of audited work, I walked into the room where it mattered and I said the numbers out loud. That was enough. Some men build things and wait to be thanked. I built things and documented them. When the moment came, I stood up. The rest took care of itself. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe and ring that notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.